All right, kiddos. So as promised, I am going to talk to you guys a little bit about variables in an experiment. This should hopefully help you with some of the questions that you will see on your mean and median task cards when it asks for independent and dependent variable and to determine whether or not the experiment is controlled. So let's start by simply going over the definitions of some of these terms. A controlled variable is one that is constant and unchanged, which means the controlled variable will stay the same for throughout the entire experiment. Now, an independent variable is one that you're going to purposefully change or manipulate. So if you're going to see how much sunlight plants need and you're going to give 3 different amounts of sunlight to the same plant, a sunflower, then your independent variable would be your amount of sunlight because you're purposely changing how much sunlight it gets exposed to a day. Now, your dependent variable is what's going to change as a result of changing your independent variable, kind of like cause and effect. So the effect of changing the amount of sunlight on a plant would be the amount of plant growth. So your dependent variable would be plant growth. Now, controlled experiments. Controlled experiments are one that have only one independent variable. And the reason why you can only have one independent variable is because if you change more than one thing at a time, let's go back to the sunlight issue. Let's say I change the type of flower and I make one a daisy, one a lily, and one a sunflower, and I give them each different amounts of sunlight. Let's say the daisy gets 2 hours, the lily gets 3 hours, and the sunflower gets 4 hours. When I measure plant growth, I don't know whether the amount of sunlight is changing the plant growth or if it's the type of plant that is changing the plant growth. So it's not controlled. I cannot determine which independent variable is changing the plant growth or if they both are. So in order to create a controlled experiment, you can only change one thing at a time. So let's look at some examples. This one says, Tommy investigates the amount of water to give a plant. He uses the same flower, a sunflower, for each one. So the flower, the sunflower, would be the controlled variable. It's the same. He puts all the flowers in the same amount of soil. Again, the amount of soil is a controlled variable. He gives a plant 110 milliliters of water a day and 2 hours of sunlight. Plant 2 gets 20 milliliters of water and 4 hours of sunlight. And plant 3 gets 30 milliliters of water and 6 hours of sunlight. What is the independent variable or variables? So let's look at the scenario. What is Tommy changing on purpose? Think now, and I'll give you the answer in a second. Hopefully you got the answer of the amount of water. So water is definitely one independent variable. The other independent variable, I'll put amount of water. The other independent variable is the amount of sunlight. So there are 2 independent variables. Amount of sunlight. Now the dependent variable is what's going to change in effect to changing the amount of water and the amount of sunlight each plant's given. Go ahead and think now about what you think the dependent variable is. Hopefully you're thinking the amount the plant grows because the dependent variable is plant growth. Now we have to determine, is it controlled? Why or why not? Remember that a controlled experiment is one that only has one independent variable. Because we have 2 independent variables, this is not a controlled experiment. So our answer is no, it is not controlled because it has 2 independent variables. Oops. There we go. So that's example number 1. Let's take another look at another example. This one is about Sarah. Sarah is testing which candy her mealworm likes. She puts a Jolly Rancher, a Smartie, and a Skittle in front of the mealworm. Each candy is exactly 15 centimeters away from the mealworm. So the distance from the mealworm to the candy is a controlled variable. She's not changing it. The same mealworm is used for every trial. Again, the mealworm is a controlled variable. She is not changing the type of mealworm. She records which candy the mealworm picks for 3 trials. What is the independent variable, or the variable that is being changed on purpose? Your answer should be the type of candy. Very good. Now, what is going to change in effect to her changing the type of candy? That would be the dependent variable. What's going to change is which candy the mealworm goes to. It might go to the Smartie the first time, it might go to the Skittle the second time, and it might go to the Smartie again the third time. Then she can make the assumption that the mealworm prefers the Smartie because it went there 2 out of the 3 times. To get the most accurate experiment, the more trials you have, the better off you are. So she would want to maybe test it for more than just 3 trials to make sure she gets a valid read on which candy the mealworm prefers. All right, now we have to determine, is this a controlled experiment? Why or why not? Yes, it is controlled because there is only one independent variable. Very good. Last example. Bob is making a marshmallow shooter. He uses 3 different size marshmallows. He uses a giant marshmallow, a mini marshmallow, and a regular sized marshmallow. He measures the distance each marshmallow travels in centimeters. What is the independent variable? Go ahead and think now what you think the independent variable is, and then I'll reveal the answer. So hopefully you're thinking size of the marshmallow, because he has 3 different sizes. What is going to change in effect to the changing of the size of the marshmallow? Go ahead and think about it now. Hopefully you're thinking distance in centimeters that the marshmallow will travel. And then I have to decide, is this a controlled experiment? Why or why not? Go ahead and think now. Is this controlled? Yes or no? And why or why not? Hopefully you determine that yes, it is controlled because it has only one independent variable. Very good. So hopefully this gave you a little bit more confidence to determine independent and dependent variable and to determine whether or not the experiment is controlled. I hope to see you guys next time in my next video, and stay tuned. See you guys later.